Hello, and welcome to a new little event I'm doing here. It's almost Halloween, and you know what that means. We gotta get a little creepy and spooky. So this is a little thing I'm gonna call Creeps McChungus. Huh? Oh yeah. We're gonna be reading a couple boomer stories throughout the days of October from a good old book from Boomer Chungus' childhood, huh? Scary stories to tell in the dark. Well, it's pretty dark in here. Let's get spooky, shall we? Let's see. I think I remember where I was. Oh, yes. The Thing. I don't know if you can see the picture too well, but we're going to get into what this thing is. Ted Martin and Sam Miller were good friends. They spent a lot of time together. On this particular night, they were sitting on a fence near the post office, talking about one thing and another. There was a field of turnips across the road. Suddenly, they saw something crawl out of the field and stand. It looked like a man. But in the dark, it was hard to tell for sure. Then, it was gone. But soon, it appeared again. It walked halfway across the road. Then it turned around and went back out into the field. Then, it came out a third time and started toward them. By now, Ted and Sam were scared, and they started running. But when they finally stopped, they decided they were being foolish, huh? They weren't sure what had scared them, so they decided to go back and get a better look. Pretty soon they saw it, for it was coming to meet them. It was wearing black pants, a white shirt, and black suspenders. Sam said, I'm going to try and touch it. Then we'll know if it's real. He walked up to it and peered into its face. It had bright, penetrating eyes sunk deep in its head. It looked like a skeleton. Ted took one look and screamed, and again he and Sam ran. But this time, the skeleton followed. When they got to Ted's house, they stood in the doorway and watched it. It stayed out in the road for a while, then it disappeared. A year later, Ted got sick and died. Toward the end, Sam sat up every night with him. The night Ted died, Sam said he looked just like the skeleton. That's all for tonight. Tune in next time for another story. Welcome back to another night of Creeps McChungus. We're going to be going back into the scary stories to tell in the dark, huh? The Boomer Classic from Chungus' childhood, huh? Some of you may be familiar with these stories, huh? You read it yourselves. Most of you have never seen the likes of this, huh? There's our picture for the day. Man in a casket. Let's see what's going on here. Cold. That's Clay. A farmer had a daughter for whom he cared more than anything on earth. She fell in love with a farmhand named Jim, but the farmer did not think Jim was good enough for his daughter. To keep them apart, he sent her to live with her uncle on the other side of the county. Soon after she left, Jim got sick, and he wasted away and died. Everyone said he died of a broken heart. The farmer felt so guilty about Jim's death, he could not tell his daughter what had happened. She continued to think about Jim and the life they might have had together. One night, many weeks later, there was a knock on her uncle's door. When the girl opened the door, Jim was standing there. "Your father asked me to come get you," he said. "I came on his best horse." "Is there anything wrong?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. She packed a few things, and they left. She rode behind him, clinging to his waist. Soon, he complained of a headache. "It aches something terrible," he told her. She put her hand on his forehead. "Why, you're as cold as clay," she said. "I hope you're not ill." And she wrapped her handkerchief around his head. They traveled so swiftly that in a few hours they reached the farm. The girl quickly dismounted and knocked on the door. Her father was startled to see her. "Didn't you send for me?" she asked. "No, I didn't," he said. She turned to Jim, but he was gone. And so was the horse. They went to the stable to look for them. The horse was there. It was covered with sweat and trembling with fear. But there was no sign of Jim. Terrified, her father told her the truth about Jim's death. Then quickly, he went to see Jim's parents. They decided to open his grave. The corpse was in its coffin, but around its head, they found the girl's handkerchief. Looks like that's all for tonight. Until the next fright, have a good night. We're back once again, huh? Y'all having a spooky month so far? You ready for some more scary stories, huh? I think it might be dark enough. Let's just get right into it, huh? Today's story, the White Wolf. Look at that. Beautiful illustrations in this book, I have to say. Now, the timber wolves around French Creek had gotten out of hand. There were so many wolves, the farmers could not stop them from killing their cattle and sheep. So, the state put a bounty on them. It would pay a hunter $10 for every wolf pelt he turned in. A butcher in town named Bill Williams thought that was a pretty good deal. He stopped working as a butcher and started killing wolves. He was good at it. Every year, he killed over 500 of them. That came to more than $5,000. It was quite a bit of money in those days. After 4 or 5 years, Bill had killed so many wolves, there were hardly any left in that area. So, he retired, and he vowed never to harm another wolf, because wolves had made him rich. Then, one day, a farmer reported that a white wolf had killed 2 of his sheep. He had shot at it and hit it, but the bullets didn't have any effect. Soon, that wolf was seen all over the countryside, killing, running, but nobody could stop it. One night, it came into Bill's yard and killed his pet cow. Bill forgot about his decision never to harm another wolf. He went into town the next morning and brought a young lamb for bait. He took it out into the hills and tied it to a tree. Then, he backed off about 50 yards and sat down under a tree. With his gun in his lap, he waited. When Bill didn't come back, his friends started looking for him. Finally, they found the lamb. It was still tied to a tree. It was hungry, but it was alive. Then, they found Bill. He was still sitting against the other tree, but he was dead. His throat had been torn open. But there was no sign of a struggle. His gun hadn't been fired, and there were no tracks in the soil around him. As for the white wolf, it was never seen again. Looks like that's going to do it for this one, you guys. Creeps McChungus has pleased you once more. Have a great night. Stay safe out there. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Huh? Creeps McChungus here to deliver you another scary story to tell in the dark, huh? Yep. We've been having a lot of fun so far this month. A lot of spooks, a lot of thrills and chills. Who am I to cut this party short, huh? Today's story, simple title, The Haunted House. Let's go. One time, a preacher went to see if he could put a haunt to rest at a house in his settlement. The house had been haunted for about 10 years. Several people had tried to stay there all night, but they always would get scared out by the haunt. So, this preacher took his Bible and went to the house, went on in, built himself a good fire and lit a lamp, sat there reading the Bible. Then, just before midnight, he heard something start up in the cellar, walking back and forth, back and forth. Then, it sounded like somebody was trying to scream and got choked off. Then there was a lot of thrashing around, struggling. Finally, everything got quiet. The old preacher took up his Bible again, but before he could start reading, he heard footsteps coming up the cellar stairs. He sat, watching the door to the cellar, and the footsteps kept coming, closer and closer. He saw the doorknob turn, and when the door began to open, he jumped up and hollered, "What do you want?" The door shut back, easy-like, and there wasn't a sound. The preacher was trembling a little, but he finally opened the Bible and read a while. Then he got up and laid the book on the chair and went on to mend the fire. Then the haunt started walking again, and step, step, step up the cellar stairs. The old preacher sat watching the door, saw the doorknob turn, and the door open. It looked like a young woman. He backed up and said, Who are you? What do you want?" Take a little peek. Yeah, she's a looker, huh? The haunt sort of swayed like she didn't know what to do. Then she just faded out. The old preacher waited, and when he didn't hear any more noises, he went over and shut the door. He was sweating and trembling all over, but he was a brave man, and he thought he'd be able to see it through. So, he turned his chair to where he could watch, and he sat down and waited. It wasn't long before he heard the haunt start up again, slowly. Step, 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 closer and closer, step, step, and it was right at the door. The preacher stood up and held his Bible out before him. Then the knob slowly turned, and the door opened wide. This time, the preacher spoke quiet-like. He said, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, who are you, and what do you want?" The haunt came right across the room, straight to him, and took hold of his coat. It was a young woman about 20 years old. Her hair was torn and tangled, flesh dropping off her face so that you could see the bones and parts of her teeth. She had no eyeballs, but there was a sort of blue light way back in her eye sockets. She had no nose to her face. Then she started talking. It sounded like her voice was coming and going with the wind blowing it. She told how her lover had killed her for money and buried her up in the cellar. She said if the preacher would dig up her bones and bury her properly, she could rest. Then she told him to take the end joint of the little finger from her left hand, lay it in the collection plate the next church meeting, and he'd find out who had murdered her. She said, If you come back here once more, after that, you'll hear my voice at midnight, and I'll tell you where my money is hid. You can give it to the church." The haunt sobbed like she was tired, and she sunk down toward the floor and was gone. The preacher found her bones and buried them in the graveyard. The next Sunday, the preacher put the finger bone in the collection plate, and when a certain man happened to touch it, it stuck to his hand. The man jumped up and rubbed and scraped and tore at that bone, trying to get it off. Then he went to screaming, like he was going crazy. Well, he confessed to the murder, and they took him on to jail. After the man was hung, the preacher went back to the house one midnight, and the haunt's voice told him to dig under the hearthrug. He did, and he found a big sack of money. And where that haunt had held onto his coat, the print of those bony fingers was burned right into the cloth. It never did come out. Guess that's it for tonight. Until next time, stay safe. Welcome back, huh? Y'all having fun out there? Y'all being safe? I hope so. Wouldn't want to end up like some of these people in my stories, now would you? Yeah, that's right. We're still reading scary stories in the dark. And today, got a nice little quick one for you. I think you're gonna like. It's called The Guests. A young man and his wife were on a trip to visit his mother. Usually, they arrived in time for supper, but they had gotten a late start, and now it was getting dark. So they decided to look for a place to stay overnight and go on in the morning. Just off the road, they saw a small house in the woods. "Maybe they rent rooms," the wife said, so they stopped to ask. An elderly man and woman came to the door. They didn't rent rooms, they said, but they would be glad to have them stay overnight as their guests. They had plenty of room, and they would enjoy the company. The old woman made coffee and brought out some cake, and the four of them talked for a while. Then, the young couple were taken to their room. They again explained that they wanted to pay for this, but the old man said he would not accept any money. The young couple got up early the next morning before their host had awakened. On a table near the front door, they left an envelope with some money in it for the room. Then, they went on to the next town. They stopped in a restaurant and had some breakfast. When they told the owner where they had stayed, he was shocked. "Puh, that can't be," he said. "That house burned to the ground, and the man and woman who lived there died in that there fire." The young couple could not believe it, so they went back to the house. Only now there was no house. All they found was a burned-out shell. They stood staring at the ruins, trying to understand what had happened. Then the woman screamed. In the rubble was a badly burned table, like the one they had seen by the front door. On that table was the envelope they had left that morning. And this is the picture. Soak it all in. Well, I guess that's it for tonight, huh? Until next time. Yeah, the dogs may be barking, the night may be cold, but it's never too spooky for a scary story now, isn't it? Especially ones told in the dark. Yeah, we're back again, and we got another quick one for you. This one, a little more paranormal. It's called The Girl Who Stood on a Grave. Some boys and girls were at a party one night. There was a graveyard down the street, and they were talking about how scary it was. "Don't ever stand on a grave after dark," one of the boys said. The person inside will grab you. He'll pull you under. That's not true, one of the girls said. It's just superstition. I'll give you $1 if you stand on a grave, said the boy. The grave doesn't scare me, said the girl. I'll do it right now. The boy handed her his knife. Stick this knife in one of the graves, he said. Then we'll know you were there. The graveyard was filled with shadows and as quiet as death. There's nothing to be scared of, the girl told herself, but she was scared anyway. She picked out a grave and stood on it. Then, quickly, she bent over and plunged the knife into the soil. As she started to leave, she couldn't get away. Something was holding her back. She tried a second time to leave, but she couldn't move. She was filled with terror. Something's got me, she screamed, and she fell to the ground. When she didn't come back, the others went to look for her. They found her body sprawled across the grave. Without realizing it, she had plunged the knife through her skirt and pinned it to the ground. It was only the knife that held her. She had died of fright. Look at that, huh? Guess you don't want to jump to conclusions in the cemetery now, do you? Well, remember what I say, huh? Stay safe out there. It's almost Halloween. We're getting closer every day. Take care. All right, huh? Back in the dark. I got my boomer book, huh? I wonder what kind of spooky story we're going to get into today. This one is called Room for One More. A man named Joseph Blackwell came to Philadelphia on a business trip. He stayed with friends in the big house they owned outside the city. That night, they had a good time visiting. But when Blackwell went to bed, he tossed and turned and couldn't sleep. Sometime during the night, he heard a car turn into the driveway. He went to the window to see who was arriving at such a late hour. In the moonlight, he saw a long, black hearse filled with people. The driver of the hearse looked up at him. When Blackwell saw his queer, hideous face, he shuddered. The driver called to him. There's room for one more. Then he waited for a minute or two, and he drove off. In the morning, Blackwell told his friends what had happened. You were dreaming, they said. Yeah, I must have been, he said, but it didn't seem like a dream. After breakfast, he went into Philadelphia. He spent the day high above the city in one of the new office buildings there. Late in the afternoon, he was waiting for an elevator to take him back down to the street. But when it arrived, it was very crowded. One of the passengers looked out, called to him. There's room for one more, he said. It was the driver of the hearse. No thanks, said Blackwell. I'll get the next one. The doors closed, and the elevator started down. There was shrieking, screaming, and the sound of a crash. The elevator had fallen to the bottom of the shaft. Everyone on board was killed. Here's our picture. All right. It's going well, huh? Y'all still being safe out there? Don't get scared too bad. It's a spooky kind of season. Okay. Welcome back once more. Tonight, we have a bit of a creature feature for you. Any of you sly eyes catch the last video? You might have seen the title. You know exactly what's coming, huh? Today's story is called The Wendigo. A wealthy man wanted to go hunting in a part of northern Canada where few people had ever hunted. He traveled to a trading post and tried to find a guide to take him. But no one would do it. It was too dangerous, they said. Finally, he found an Indian who needed money badly, and he agreed to take him. The Indian's name was Defago. They made camp in the snow near a large frozen lake. For 3 days they hunted, but they had nothing to show for it. The third night, a windstorm came up. They lay in their tent, listening to the wind howling and the trees whipping back and forth. To see the storm better, the hunter opened the tent flap. What he saw startled him. There wasn't a breath of air, and the trees were standing perfectly still. Yet, he could hear the wind howling, and the more he listened, the more it sounded as if it was calling Defago's name. Defago, it called. Defago. I must be losing my mind, the hunter thought. But Defago had gotten out of his sleeping bag. He was huddled in the corner of the tent, his head buried in his arms. "What's this all about?" the hunter asked. "It's nothing," Defago said. But the wind continued to call to him, and Defago became more tense and more restless. "Defago," it called. "Defago." Suddenly, he jumped to his feet, and he began to run from the tent. But the hunter grabbed him, wrestled him to the ground. "You can't leave me out here," the hunter shouted. Then the wind called again, and Defago broke loose and ran into the darkness. The hunter could hear him screaming as he went. Again and again he cried, "Oh, my fiery feet! My burning feet of fire!" Then his voice faded away, and the wind died down. At daybreak, the hunter followed Defago's tracks in the snow. They went through the woods, down towards the lake, then out onto the ice. Give you a little peek, huh? Couple of tracks. Where's he running off to? But soon, he noticed something strange. The steps Defago had taken got longer and longer. They were so long no human could have taken them. It was as if something had helped him to hurry away. The hunter followed the tracks out to the middle of the lake, but there they disappeared. At first, he thought that Defago had fallen through the ice, but there wasn't any hole. Then he thought that something had pulled him off up into the sky. That doesn't make any sense. As he stood, wondering what had happened, the wind picked up again. Soon it was howling as it had the night before. Then he heard Defago's voice. It was coming from up above. And again he heard Defago scream, "My fiery feet! My burning feet!" But there was nothing to be seen. Now, the hunter wanted to leave that place as fast as he could. He went back to camp and packed. Then he left some food for Defago and started out. Weeks later, he reached civilization. The following year, he went back to hunt in that area again. He went to the same trading post to look for a guide. The people there could not explain what had happened to Defago that night, but they had not seen him around since. "Maybe it was the Wendigo," one of them said, and he laughed. "It's supposed to come with the wind. It drags you along at great speed until your feet are burned away. And more of you than that. Then it carries you into the sky and it drops you. It's just a crazy story, but that's what some of the Indians say." A few days later, the hunter was at the trading post again. An Indian came in, sat by the fire. He had a blanket wrapped around him, wore his hat so that you couldn't see his face. The hunter thought there was something familiar about him. He walked over and he asked, "Are you Defago?" The Indian didn't answer. "Do you know anything about him?" No answer. He began to wonder if something was wrong, if the man needed help or something, but he couldn't see his face. "Are you all right?" he asked. No answer. To get a look at him, he lifted the Indian's hat. Then he screamed. There was nothing under the hat but a pile of ashes. And I think that's going to do it again for tonight, huh? Until we read again, I'm Creeps McChungus. Stay safe out there. We're back another night, huh? We'll be back here every night if I had it my way, but only during the spooky season, huh? We're back with these scary stories to tell in the dark. I know it's not that dark, but hopefully it's dark enough for you, huh? Where did we leave off? Today's story is called The Hook. And it looks like we get the picture right away on this one. Oh, yeah. This one's a bit of a classic. You may recognize it from other stories that have been adapted since this book came out, I'm sure. But it's still a killer. Donald and Sarah went to the movies. Then they went for a ride in Donald's car. They parked up on a hill at the edge of town. From there, they could see the lights up and down the valley. Donald turned on the radio and found some music, but an announcer broke in with a news bulletin. A murderer had escaped from the state prison. He was armed with a knife and was heading south on foot. His left hand was missing. In its place, he wore a hook. "Let's roll up the windows and lock the doors," said Sarah. "That's a good idea," said Donald. "That prison isn't too far away," said Sarah. "Maybe we really should just go home." "But it's only 10 o'clock, said Donald. "I don't care what time it is," she said. "I want to go home." "Look, Sarah," said Donald. "He's not going to climb all the way up here. Why would he do that? Even if he did, all the doors are locked. How would he get in?" "Donald, he could just take that hook and break through a window and open a door," she said. "I'm scared. I want to go home." Donald was annoyed. "Girls are always afraid of something," he said. As he started the car, Sarah thought she heard someone or something scratching at her door. "Did you hear that?" she asked as they roared away. "It sounded like someone was trying to get in." "Huh, sure," said Donald. Soon, they got to her house. "Would you like to come in and have some cocoa?" she asked. "Nah," he said. "I gotta go home." He went around to the other side of the car to let her out, and hanging on the door handle was a hook. Sounds like the old boy almost got him, huh? Yep, it was a quick one today, but you know what they say. The quicker you get the Chungus out of the way, the quicker you can go back out and play, huh? Be safe out there. See you next time. Ooh. A little piece of match just fell right on Chungus's leg, huh? Wouldn't want to burn down this Halloween. Anyway, we've come to the penultimate story in our series of unfortunate, scary stories. On the docket today, a story called High Beams. And once again, we got an early picture to show you. Yeah, take it all in, huh? Now don't read ahead. That's my job. The girl driving that blue old sedan was a senior at the high school. She lived on a farm about 8 miles away and used the car to drive back and forth. She had driven into town that night to see a basketball game. Now, She was on her way home. As she pulled away from the school, she noticed a red pickup truck following her out of the parking lot. A few minutes later, the truck was still behind her. I guess we're going in the same direction, she thought. She began to watch the truck in her mirror. When she changed her speed, the driver of the truck changed his speed. When she passed the car, so did he. Then, he turned on his high beams, flooding her car with light. He left them on for almost a minute. He probably wants to pass me, she thought, but she was becoming uneasy. Usually, she drove home over a back road. Not too many people went that way. But when she turned onto that road, so did the truck. I've got to get away from him, she thought, and she began to drive faster. Then, he turned his high beams on again. After a minute, he turned them off. Then he turned them on again, and off again. She drove even faster, but the truck driver stayed right behind her. Then, he turned his high beams on again. Once more, her car was ablaze with light. What is he doing? She wondered. What does he want? Then he turned them off again. But a minute later, he had them on again, and he left them on. At last, she pulled into her driveway, and the truck pulled in right behind her. She jumped from the car and ran to the house. Call the police! She screamed at her father. Out in the driveway, she could see the driver of the truck. He had a gun in his hand. When the police arrived, they started to arrest him, but he pointed to the girl's car. You don't want me, he said. You want him. Crouched behind the driver's seat, there was a man with a knife. As the driver of the truck explained it, the man slipped into this girl's car just before she left the school. He saw it happen, but there was no way he could stop it. He thought about getting the police, but he was afraid to leave her, so he followed her car. Each time the man in the back seat reached up to overpower her, the driver of the truck turned on his high beams. Then the man dropped down, afraid that someone might see him. Well, like I said, that is the penultimate story. So if you don't know what that means, it means second to last. So I guess we're going to have to move on from these scary stories soon. I wonder what else is in store. Well, here we are, huh? The final story of this book. Yeah, it was fun while it lasted. Well, fun if you like scary things. It hasn't been the scariest, but I hope this book from my childhood has brought you a couple of frights this year. And don't worry, just because this is the last story of this book doesn't mean it's over. I think I could find a couple more scary stories lying around for you, if I look hard enough in the dark. The last story we're going to be reading from this book is called The Babysitter. And it's another early picture. Don't you just love it? I sure do. Because I could just concentrate on telling you this story, huh? It was 9 o'clock in the evening. Everybody was sitting around on the couch in front of the TV. There was Richard, Brian, Jenny, and Doreen, the babysitter. The telephone rang. Maybe it's your mother, said Doreen. She picked up the phone. Before she could say a word, the man laughed hysterically and hung up. Who was it? Said Richard. Some nut, said Doreen. What'd I miss? At 9:30, the telephone rang again. Doreen answered it. It was the man who had called before. I'll be there soon, he said, laughing as he hung up. Who was it? The children asked. Some crazy person, she said. About 10 o'clock, the telephone rang again. Jenny got to it first. "Hello?" she said. It was the same man. "1 more hour," he said. And he laughed and hung up. "He said 1 more hour. What did he mean?" asked Jenny. "Don't worry," said Doreen. "Somebody fooling around." "I'm scared," said Jenny. About 10:30, the telephone rang once more. When Doreen picked it up, the man said, "Pretty soon now," and he laughed. "Why are you doing this?" Doreen screamed, and he hung up. "Was it that guy again?" asked Brian. "Yes," said Doreen. "I'm going to call the operator and complain." The operator told her to call back if it happened again, and she would try to trace the call. At 11 o'clock, the telephone rang again. Doreen answered it. "Very soon now," the man said, and he laughed and hung up. Doreen called the operator. Almost at once, she called back. "That person is calling from a telephone upstairs," she said. "You'd better leave. I'll get the police." Just then, a door upstairs opened. A man they had never seen before started down the stairs toward them. As they ran from the house, he was smiling in a very strange way. A few minutes later, the police found him there and arrested him. Kind of an uneventful ending. But at least our protagonists got out alive, huh? And yep, while I tell you that this was the last story in the book, it's only a half-truth. There are a couple stories to soften the palate of being so spooked. And there's also a couple little thises and that's in here that I didn't show you, because I want you to experience the magic yourself. I suggest if you had any fun with this book at all, go out and get it. I saw it the other day at a Barnes & Noble in a hardback cover with a lot more than just this. So, I guess we're going to have to find something else to read to you, huh? October ain't over yet. It's almost Halloween.